Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. It may be afternoon or evening where you are. This is the Confidently Present Your Qualitative Results chapter. I'm Rachel. I'm a senior qualitative research mentor here at Statistics Solutions. We are a full-service dissertation editing consulting company, and we provide assistance to doctoral students with their research, both quantitative and qualitative, from topic development all the way through to final defense. So we have quantitative mentors on staff, we have qualitative mentors on staff, we have research mentors on staff to assist doctoral students at any stage of the dissertation process. As I said, I'm a qualitative mentor. So this webinar is on presenting your qualitative results chapter. We also have a webinar series for all of those other areas of the dissertation. So if you do want to check out statisticsolutions.com, you can find our other webinars, both links to upcoming webinars as well as previously recorded webinars. We also have a lot of complimentary goodies available on our website. Answers to most questions that you could possibly think of. We have a blog about it. So those are all available as well. As webinar attendees, you will also receive a copy of this webinar, a recording of this webinar, and the slides that will go out within the next day or two. I am joined by Brittany in the background. She is here in case of any really technical difficulty on our end. She has provided some links to you all in the chat so that you can check out our website. She will also be fielding any questions as they come in about what we do here at Statistics Solutions. If you have any questions related to the content of this specific webinar, so qualitative results chapter, you can pop those into the question and answer box, and I will leave time at the end to answer those. So read the questions aloud and then answer them. Again, this is Confidently Present Your Qualitative Results chapter. So if you do have quantitative questions, you're absolutely welcome to join, but please be advised in advance that I am not the best person to answer any questions that you might have about quantitative. We do have other webinars available for that. I'm Rachel, Senior Qualitative Research Mentor. This is Confidently Present Your Qualitative Results. So this list here on the first page is a compilation of the different sections that I've seen over the years working with doctoral students that are required to go into a results chapter. So the one thing that I will say before we start out is if you have a template, if you have a checklist from your university or from your chair, from your department, always default to that, okay? But if you're struggling to get started, if you don't have something like that, as I said, these are the most common sections of the chapter 4 or the results chapter that I see. So you're in good shape if you include each of these. And so this will also provide the roadmap for the webinar today. So an introduction, a section on the setting, demographics, data collection, data analysis, results, trustworthiness, and summary. In your introduction, you will restate the problem and the purpose of your study. This is not a place to get creative. In fact, nowhere in your dissertation do you want to state these differently. Okay, so they're verbatim. Everywhere you state the problem and the purpose, they need to be verbatim. Okay, what you have in the first chapter. So it can start to sound a little bit redundant. I understand that. Fight the temptation to use different language. Words have meaning, so changing some of the words may actually impact the meaning of what you're doing. Okay, so the problem and the purpose, you want to remind your readers of your research questions. Okay, so I like to think about holding the reader's hand as I write. So, think about it from the reader's perspective. What kind of information do they need coming into the chapter to understand your study and understand your results? So they need those research questions again. And then you want to present an overview of the chapter, just a little preview of those sections that are to come. So you can think about sort of looking back to recap what you've told them before as you restate the problem, purpose, and research questions. And then you can think about sort of leaning forward, right, and looking forward as you preview the chapter. In the section on the setting, you want to include information about where you conducted your research. Okay, so I like to think about this as, what do my readers need to know to be able to understand the results and understand the interpretation of the results, right? What is the context that they need in which to understand these? So any conditions that might have impacted your research or influenced your research, or your participants. Okay, so both conducting the research and anything that might have influenced your participants. Okay, also anything that may have impacted the interpretation of your results. So one thing that I like to think of is that in your methods chapter, you have probably already talked about and established the setting of your research, but that was in your proposal, right? That was sort of in an ideal world. If everything goes exactly according to plan and there's not like a COVID-19 outbreak worldwide, what will my, data collection process look like? Things change. So in the results chapter, this is where you talk about why and how things changed and any possible impacts. Okay, so this is for the setting where you would address that. Your participant demographics is a section where you would present any of those characteristics or information about your participants that are important to the study, that are relevant, again, to establish the context for your research, to establish the context for the results. Okay, so think about, the type of study that you're conducting. Maybe you are conducting some, organizational study. Okay, and so it's important to understand how long your participants, maybe their tenure at this organization. So that would be appropriate to present. Maybe their age is appropriate. Maybe their gender is appropriate. Maybe the length of time they've held in a particular position within a company is important. Okay, so you just want to think about what makes the most sense to present to your readers. And sometimes you could do this as a table, you could do this as in narrative format, more like a profile of each participant. No matter how you decide to present this, the main thing is maintaining confidentiality. So you don't want to present so much information that your participants become clearly identifiable to someone else. You need to maintain their confidentiality. So it's a trick between providing the reader, providing that balance to the reader for the context and understanding the relevant characteristics of your participants, but also maintaining their confidentiality. Okay, so for example, if something were to if you were to present something like age, where along with some other demographic characteristics, it would become clear who your participant was, you could use an age range, right? Say maybe, they're 45 to 54 years old. And so sort of obscure things in that way, okay, to maintain confidentiality. You'll also present a section on data collection. And so again, if you think about that, you outlined really clearly how you would collect data in your methods chapter, but now you've collected data, so you need to write what actually happened. This is where you do that. And so again, any deviation from what you proposed to do in your methods chapter, this is where it goes. So how many participants did you collect data from? What was the location? What was the frequency of all data collection? Okay, so if it wasn't just participants, maybe you conducted observations, what was the location of that? What was the frequency? How you recorded all of your data, okay, describe that. You'll like I said, detail any of those variations from the plan that you presented. Okay, so that the reader can clearly see, this is what you plan to do, but here's how things changed. Here's what changed, here's why, and here is the possible impact of this. Okay, anything unusual in data collection as well. This is where you would present that. And so this is, as I said, this is where you would talk about things like if you went into data collection planning to maybe conduct face-to-face interviews, and that was no longer possible because of the pandemic. And so you switched to Zoom. This is where you would address that, right, in the setting as well. So it's sort of a really good contemporary real world example of how things can change and how we address them between the methods and the results chapter. And then talking about the potential impact of that. What's the potential impact of conducting interviews over video conferencing as opposed to face-to-face? Your data analysis section is where you will detail how you applied your plan for data analysis that you outlined in your methods chapter, how you applied that specifically to your data. So how you took your data and first, broke them down, right, into codes, and then started to build them up into categories again. So how that particular plan was applied to your data. And so you want to be really descriptive and clear here and sort of step by step, right? That, this was the first thing that you did, and, you coded one passage one way and talk about why, so that it's very, very clear to the reader. So basically moving from those codes to the categories. And this is also where you will describe how you handled any discrepant cases. And so discrepant cases are when we see patterns in our data, in our qualitative data, but sometimes someone doesn't quite fit the mold, right? Someone doesn't quite fit the pattern. So you might have a participant who describes a really different experience than all of your other participants. And so this is where you would describe how you handle that, how you factor that into the analysis. This is that section. And then you'll come back to and revisit this later on in the results presentation. So your results can be organized in different ways, okay? And there's not a hard and fast rule for this. Really, the decisions that you make for the presentation and for anything in your dissertation, honestly, have to be the most appropriate for your study. They have to make sense. They have to be defensible. So it might make sense to organize your results by research question. It might make sense to organize your results by theme or by category. If your school, and I know that some do this, if your school requires that results are presented in a particular way, always do that, okay? Even if you think that it maybe doesn't make the most sense, and sometimes it doesn't, always, again, default to what your school wants to see. Okay, because they're the ones that have to sign off on your dissertation and get you through. So the main question to ask yourself is what makes the most sense for presentation and for organizing those, and then go with that. For the presentation of qualitative data and your results, you should be using mostly your own words. Okay, so you will include supporting quotes from participants. If you've conducted document analysis, you might use excerpts from the documents. If you have observations and you have maybe photographs or sketches or something like that, those might be appropriate as well to present your results. But most of this should be your own words. And so you discuss your data, okay, and interpret it if appropriate. And I say that because there are different types of qualitative research designs, and not all of them allow for the interpretation in the presentation of the data or in the results chapter. There are a couple of research designs that do, And so if that is the case with your study, then that would be appropriate. So you would discuss your data and interpret it. Otherwise, the discussion comes in a different chapter, in the discussion chapter. Okay, so again, as you're presenting your data, as you're presenting your results, you want to think, is this logical and clear for the reader, right? You're holding their hand as you move through the results chapter. As I mentioned, the discrepant cases are those that don't fit the patterns that you are seeing in your data. Okay, so they might appear to disconfirm your findings. We don't toss these out though, right? That's not how it works in qualitative data, because this tells us something. It can provide alternate explanations. It illustrates that there's variations of an experience, right? Everyone experiences something differently. Okay, and so even though those experiences might be patterned, that's not always the case. And so any of these discrepant cases you would want to discuss in the context of that category. And so when I say category, I mean sort of whatever that pattern is. So if you have a category, if you have a theme, you would discuss that discrepant case at that level. Okay, not sort of overall. It's unlikely, though certainly could happen, that one participant is completely different in every single aspect from the other participants. Okay, and so you would want to just illustrate those places where there was this variation. You can absolutely use other methods to visualize your findings, okay, for clarity to the reader. Tables, figures, maps, drawings, any of these might be appropriate. I think a good rule of thumb is to use them sparingly. And of course, as I said before, asking, is it really necessary, right? Does this enhance the reader's understanding? And if yes, go ahead and include it. If the answer is no, then I would leave it out. Okay. Anywhere that you use these, though, they need to be described in the text. So you don't necessarily need to include paragraphs and paragraphs about one table, but when I say described in the text, I mean, you do need to give a brief write-up of, here is what table 1, for example, presents, and sort of just outline that a little bit more so it's not abrupt for the reader. You don't want them to come upon a table and have no context for it whatsoever. You don't want them to find a table and not be able to make any sense of it. Okay, so you want to provide that description for your reader. The trustworthiness section is also something that you've probably included in your methods chapter. So here's where we revisit that to talk about, again, any deviations from the plan in your methods chapter. So how you ultimately establish trustworthiness in your study. So credibility, transferability, dependability, confirmability, those 4 sort of key tenets of trustworthiness. Basically, how do we know that the findings, the results are accurate? Are they applicable, right? Can they transfer to other contexts? Are they replicable? Do we know that the findings are based on the participants and not, the researcher and the researcher's opinion about things? And so you probably in your methods chapter outlined how you would establish each of these. Maybe, for example, you said that you would conduct member checking, right, to establish confirmability and maybe credibility. Okay. And, member checking has to do with, once you have your results, presenting a brief, summary of the results to your participants and having them talk with you about the results. Was that reflect, do they reflect their experience? And and those kinds of things, having that deeper conversation. And maybe you plan to do this, but then when it came time, you couldn't get in touch with several of your participants. Okay, so then you would describe that in this section, and then what you ultimately did to establish trustworthiness. In your summary, you want to highlight the findings. What were those key important points? If someone only had time to flip to your summary to understand what you found, then what would they need to know? Okay, so you want to paint that picture for them. And you also, again, as I said, as we're looking backward and forward, you want to transition to the next chapter, which will probably be your discussion chapter, and then preview what's coming in that chapter as well. So, a greater discussion of the results, interpretation, all of those things. So some of you are probably in this webinar to, learn more about the components of the chapter. Some of you might be here because you're having more of a sort of philosophical or existential crisis in terms of the larger "where do I start" question. And I absolutely understand that. So the results chapter is, it's different from the proposal, but I think what is tricky about it too is that it may have been a while since you wrote your proposal. It may have been a while since you were in a good writing habit, right? And this happens. It depends on the program. It depends on a lot of things. Certainly in my own program, because of the nature of the work that I was doing, it had really been years since I wrote my proposal and then was ready to draft my results. Okay, so I was out of the habit, I was out of the practice. And so I do have some tips for those of you who are here for that reason. The first thing that I would say is that you do not have to start at the beginning. So even though I have outlined all of these sections of the chapter in a particular order, simply for presentation's sake today in the webinar, you don't have to write them in this order, okay? Some people do very well sitting down and drafting an introduction because it provides a roadmap for the rest of the chapter and provides some structure and sort of gets them thinking. Other people don't work like that. I am in the other people category. I have to write the content and then come back to the introduction, come back to the summary. Okay, so if that's you, you do not have to start at the beginning. You are the boss of this process. Okay, so you can start wherever it makes you feel most comfortable. Maybe you are feeling really good. You have a lot of motivation and confidence and things are really going well. And so you decide to start drafting your themes, for example. You decide to start big, okay? Go ahead and do that. If you're feeling good, take advantage of it. Motivation does not come to you, right? You have to go after it. It doesn't just, we're not just sitting here waiting for it to come. I mean, we can, but you're never going to get a results chapter that way. So you have to work your way in. So if you're feeling good, as I said, take on a big section. If you are not feeling so good, go for the low-hanging fruit. Write up the section on the setting. Write up, make a table for your demographics. The important thing is that you're making progress. So don't fall into this trap of thinking, that it's not good enough. Okay, you're moving toward the mountain. Your demographics table has to get made. So even if you think it's not enough, you were going to have to do it at some point anyway, right? Why not do it when you're kind of low on motivation, just like watching your favorite TV show, and you just make the table? So if you need to start with the low-hanging fruit, start with that. If you're feeling great and you want to tackle something bigger, then do that. You're the boss. The other tips that I have are to free write frequently, and that 10 to 15 minutes a day can generate a lot of words. Okay, so I free wrote a lot when I was working on my own dissertation. And when I say free writing, I mean, you don't censor yourself. And I know how difficult that is because we're a certain personality type. We want everything to be perfect the minute we lay it out on the paper, and we don't want to have to worry about it. But free writing is writing without censoring yourself. Write about your results, write about your topic, write around your topic, write around your results, right? Whatever you're thinking related to your results, right? Just to generate ideas, and don't censor yourself. Okay. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about grammar. You have to make a mess before you can clean it up. Okay, that is how this works. So if you work best free writing with a pen and paper, do it that way. If you work the best on a laptop, do it that way. Whatever makes the most sense for you. Lock yourself in the bathroom from your kids if you need to. Okay, set a timer for 15 minutes. Turn all of your notifications off and just write. Some of it is going to be garbage, probably. Okay, that's fine. It's totally fine, right? Because there will also be useful bits of writing in there that you can tease out and expand upon when you're doing some more formal writing toward the chapter. Or maybe you pull part of it out and you do some free writing on it the next day, okay, to sort of further develop or refine those ideas. So my point is that, you know, don't go for perfection, right? Start wherever you need to that makes the most sense to get you back into the writing habit, right? You can provide yourself with some structure or not, okay, but you can get this done, right? There are concrete ways to approach this that just take some, you know, kind of finessing in terms of what makes the most sense for you and your own life. If you are still struggling, this is where we come in. Okay, again, I'm Rachel. I'm a senior qualitative research mentor here at Statistics Solutions. We're a full service dissertation consulting company. And our goal is to provide doctoral students like yourselves timely support to help you get through the dissertation. Okay, we provide a complimentary 30-minute consultation during our business hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 Eastern Standard Time in the United States. During that call, we would talk with you about your own specific research needs, okay, so that we can determine the best fit and how we can help out. So you can email us at info@statisticsolutions.com. You can call us at 877-437-8622 is our number. If you go to our website, you will, there's a link so that you can actually self-schedule for that consultation. And again, that consultation is complimentary. So that initial consultation, so that we can determine how we can help you the best, is complimentary. So are there other questions? I don't see anything in the question and answer. Go ahead and pop those into the question and answer box, and I will both read the question aloud and answer it for everyone. Okay, let's see. Question about What are my thoughts on using word clouds for a single feeling answer among participants? My general thinking on word clouds is that they can be helpful tools to get us thinking a little bit more deeply about what we are seeing in our data. But I don't think that they are a particularly useful analytic tool in and of themselves. I have another question about how important is it to have more than one researcher look at the coding results of the qualitative research to establish trustworthiness? What other ways are there to establish validity or reliability of the qualitative research? Yeah, so let me just go back to my slide on trustworthiness, because there are a lot of other ways to do this. You could certainly do intercoder reliability, although it is not necessary. Triangulation using multiple sources of data, using in-depth description or rich description, an audit trail. So kind of a, diary of your thinking about the process and the decisions that you've made related to data analysis. As I said, member checking in the webinar, but also transcript verification. There are a lot of ways to do this. So like I said, using multiple researchers and intercoder reliability can be one of them, but it's certainly not the only one. Not everyone has that luxury of time. I have another question about what are my thoughts on using metaphors. I would need you to elaborate on that. I don't know exactly what you're asking. So instead of describing a new theory, instead use a metaphor to describe a theory. I'm still not entirely sure. And I guess that probably speaks more to my thinking about it. I think, if you're conducting a grounded theory study, then you would be using a new theory. Otherwise, you would be establishing a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework that guides your study. So I guess I don't really see where metaphor comes into play here. So if you are conducting a grounded theory study, you would be generating a new theory. So you wouldn't want to use metaphor for that. If you're conducting another kind of qualitative study, you would be using a guiding theoretical or conceptual framework. So it would be something that's already established. So I guess I don't understand exactly where the metaphor piece comes in. Yeah. I have another question about transcript verification. Is that a form of member checking? So this is different. Okay. I see them used interchangeably at times, but that's not quite accurate. Member checking has to do with presenting your results to your participants. Transcript verification is presenting the transcript of the interview to your participants and having them make any revisions to it or verify its accuracy and then sending back. So one is checking the actual transcript itself, and one is sort of following up and asking kind of on a deeper level about the results and are they reflective of participants' experiences. And both can be applied to establish trustworthiness. Yeah, you got it. Are there other questions we can answer today? I don't see anything else coming in. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining me today. As I said, you'll definitely want to check out our website. We have a lot of free resources that are available to you there. You will receive a copy of this webinar and the slides from the webinar. You can also find previously recorded archive webinars on our website, as well as links to register for upcoming webinars as well. And also, don't forget that on our website, you can schedule a complimentary consultation so we can understand your research a little bit better and see how we can help out through the process. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, no matter how much you have left in it. Thanks for joining me. Take care.